Well, hello again. It's Jason Renault with the Alternative Mobile Services Association, and this week with AMSA Talks, we've got Doug Walton here with us, and Doug is with Adapt Services out of Roseburg, Oregon. Welcome, Doug.
Good morning, sir.
I see you're having a good time out there on the beach.
Yeah.
It's a unique perspective of Roseburg I hadn't seen before, but Doug, you are with the crisis team at Adapt, but you have a unique background. Could you start by telling us a little bit about yourself and how you got to this position?
Sure. I graduated high school in 91 and I enlisted in the Air Force as a security policeman. I spent a little over 8 years doing that. Moved from California. I spent 4 years in California and then about a little over 4 years in Japan, working in different sections of the policing career field. Spent my last 2.5 years working in the training section,
Hmm.
uh, being able to, I don't want to say like mentor, but to be able to uh, mold and shape and be able to get folks started out on their career path uh, where we were at.
And this is something civilians don't really understand, but a lot of police officers in our country begin their career in the military as military police. Is that your experience?
It seems like, especially when I first came in, there was a lot of prior military. It seems like it's probably 50-50 now. I've seen a decrease in that.
That's a huge area of recruitment. Yeah. Yeah. And so you served in the military and then you became a police officer yourself.
I did. I moved back to Oregon in 99, where I started with the Gold Beach Police Department. And I was there for about a year before some family things brought me back over to this side of the coast range. And was at Roseburg Police Department from 2000 until I retired last year.
Oh, congratulations. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Tell us a little bit about Roseburg and its Douglas County.
It's Roseburg's um, it's the hub of Douglas County. We're a fairly geographically large county, but population-wise, we're only about 120,000. Roseburg hosts or is home to about 25,000 of that within the city limits, but probably within just a few miles. I mean, you're going to add another 10 or 15,000. The population during the day swells up to 70 to 80,000 just
Hmm.
because that's where the businesses, the hospital, the courthouse, pretty much the main uh, hub again of Douglas County is at.
And you're a police officer in Roseburg. Did you have any special details as officer?
Yeah, did a tour in detectives. Um, Somewhere about I was here for about 6-ish years or so. I was a field training officer prior to that. I've been a hostage negotiator. I'm still actually, I'm part of the Douglas County Sheriff's Department's hostage negotiation team, but I was on the negotiation team for the Roseburg Police Department for about 23 years. Uh, I'm a crisis intervention team coordinator for Douglas County. Started that, I think I took over that position in about 2019.
And that requires quite a bit of training itself. And in Oregon, there is a state training academy for that. Is that where you got most of your training?
We do have a police academy here in the state of Oregon, which is a little different from, say, like California, where uh, you can go and do the California Post training and be picked up with an agency. Where in Oregon, in order to get the police training, you have to be hired with an agency who will then sponsor you to the state-funded police academy training.
Hmm. Hmm. And so, Doug, as a police officer, you had a unique perspective on people in crisis that had not committed a crime. Tell us a little bit about that.
So, being a smaller agency, And with a county of fairly limited resources, we interacted with folks that had substance use disorder, mental illness quite frequently. That sometimes, I'd say a lot of times, those two overlapped quite a bit.
Hmm.
So being able to have a good understanding of human nature, being able to recognize some signs and symptoms of mental illness, how to interact with folks, it certainly made my job a lot easier. And it gave me a different insight also and a different perspective on folks that maybe another officer might not have.
And I imagine you got some of the information about mental illness and addiction through the state academy, but you may have picked it up elsewhere as well. How did you gain your understanding of these illnesses?
Sure. I would say when I went through the police academy, I bet we spent maybe 2 hours on mental illness and just kind of cruised right over it. Most of what I've learned was self-taught. Um, we did not have a formalized response team for crisis intervention from the mental health or behavioral health perspective.
Mhm.
And so it was law enforcement that really went and dealt with folks who were in mental health crisis. And by interacting with these folks and kind of finding out like what their diagnosis were, what medications they took, um, what they did like, what they didn't like, and just through some nature of just communicating with them, I learned how to ask some effective questions about their diagnosis, about their medications, what was working, why they weren't doing something, in order to help gauge maybe how I could help a little bit better.
So
Along that same lines, oops, go ahead.
go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say along that same lines, I had a real interest in DUI investigations,
Mm.
specifically DUI controlled substance.
Hmm.
And many times I've found that folks who are using controlled substances, the mannerisms, their behaviors can look a lot like somebody with who was having a mental health crisis. And being able to ask some of those questions, like I said, the effective questions, help me kind of gauge it a little bit better and work my way through an investigation.
And when you say controlled substances, I'm reminded that Douglas County is a major grow area for marijuana. Is that's what you're thinking of?
Yeah, and when I first started, methamphetamine was probably our
Oh, that's
biggest
right.
problem. And then it uh, when Sudafed basically, when the lockdown on Sudafed happened, we started seeing more issues with our narcotics. Folks going to doctor, 5 or 6 different doctors' offices to get prescriptions for Vicodin, hydrocodone, uh, and they would go to different pharmacies. So they would have all these different prescriptions for different medications, and it was a little more difficult to tell those versus methamphetamine. So being able to ask questions from both the mental health side and having some understandings of controlled substances, it all just kind of flowed together naturally in both DUI investigations and uh, investigating like a peace officer custody. It just made it a lot easier for me.
So it was your curiosity that got you to develop this additional information and then trial and error.
Trial and error is probably the best way to put it. I learned really well through failing. So I've had a lot of failures in life, but I learned from them. So
That's how we learn. And did you see that other officers were equally curious and interested in these subjects, or did you find yourself sort of being identified as the guy who was interested in these sorts of things?
yeah, I think for a while I probably was one of the only guys that were interested. Um, Everyone has a unique perspective or outlook on what they want to do within their career field, which is fine because you need a variety of folks. And I found that the many of the folks that were on the hostage negotiation team with me had a more interest in learning about mental illness, how to interact with folks, and things along those lines. Um, what kind of really came to a head for me was in about 2007. Mercy Medical Center, which is our only hospital in Roseburg. We have another hospital in Reedsport, but they closed their behavioral health unit.
Oh,
So where before we had been taking folks to the behavioral health unit, there was, I think, 18 beds. Now we had not 18 beds.
hmm.
And so that made it very difficult. So there's 18 folks in our community that didn't have a temporary place to go to help be restored. Then sometime around 2014, Douglas County government opted to go private. So they disbanded the county mental health program
Mm.
and contracted with Community Health Alliance to become to take that place. And then around 2016, towards the end of 2016, Adapt Integrated Health, or just Adapt at that time,
Hmm.
merged with Community Health Alliance to form what is now Permanent Adapt Integrated Healthcare. And so for the 18 to 24 months prior to that, we had nothing because Community Health Alliance was trying to hire. So basically, the community mental health program of Douglas County went away. And those folks were then, okay, you can either go find a job somewhere else or you can work for CHA. And so there was this really rocky start. There were no policies and procedures. There was nothing to really help support law enforcement. So we basically had to learn how to deal with it until such point in time as that there was enough coordination, or that I don't want to say coordination, but when Community Health Alliance and Adapt merged, they were able to get things running smoother. And we ended up going from when somebody asked for help who was in a crisis,
Hmm.
they had to wait 9 weeks in order to see a therapist. 9 weeks. Now imagine you're on the edge, you're on that tipping point of being, safe or not safe. And they say, okay, well, we'll see you in 9 weeks.
Yeah.
What are yeah. And same thing with medication, could get medications. And so, but it wasn't long before we were down to 5 days. And 5 days was like, oh, hey, don't worry about 5 days. So we went from nine weeks to
Stand
five
on your
days.
head for 5 days, but 9 months,
Right.
that must have really caused you and your colleagues to dance a lot with folks.
Yes, and there was I would say a very significant burnout of um what's the word I'm looking for? Some I can't think of it at this
Well, a
point.
technical term
Compassion
is,
fatigue.
yeah, moral injury.
There you go. Yeah,
That,
it's
and I imagine this is a huge problem in retention of officers when you stick them in the situation where they have to make a, bad decision over, and they know it's wrong. They
it
know it.
it felt yeah, it felt very hopeless because if we couldn't take somebody to the hospital because the emergency room had already seen them 2 hours before and
Right.
released them. Um, they're sick. I mean, they are ill. Um, the only other choice is to take them to jail for some very minor crime.
Right.
But is that really going to help now? If they're wandering out in traffic, okay, you just have to make a decision of is something bad going to happen to them if you do not interact, and can you live with whatever the consequence is?
Right. And we call this the criminalization of mental illness, where you, the officer, are stuck in the situation where you have to make littering stick
Mm-hmm.
and take a person to jail just so the jail health nurse can give them a shot of Haldol and get them through the
And
next 10
or
hours.
if that at minimum they were put in a cell by themselves. At least they weren't going to walk out in traffic and get hurt.
Yeah. Wow.
It was a danged if you do, danged if you don't.
So it was a terrible situation, Doug. So you're finishing your career as a police officer for Roseburg, looking at retirement, and you make this strange decision. And this is what I really want to ask you about, is you decide to double down and come to work for ADAPT as their crisis case manager. Tell me about that transition. What were you thinking about in that process?
Sure. So in 2016, I went back to school for my bachelor's degree in crisis counseling. It seemed
Okay.
like a natural um, thing. Seems like if I'm going to get educated on something, it might as well be something I'm interested in that I can use in my current career field. And I did have a fleeting instance of thinking about continuing on for my master's, and I decided not to. So in around 2008, 17, 2018, the city of Roseburg and ADAPT uh, went in together on a joint grant through the Department of Justice to develop a mobile crisis response team.
Hmm.
We started out with two therapists. We were supposed to start out with two therapists, and then this weird thing called COVID came along, and that really hampered our ability to find therapists, bring them here. We have a housing crisis, we've got a mental health crisis, we have a substance use crisis, and trying to get folks to help um, in rural Roseburg, Oregon, it was
Yeah.
not an easy task.
This is a special caveat for folks who don't know Roseburg. It's really tough to get people to move to Roseburg.
It is, unless you want to hunt, fish, hike,
Oh,
and have no
it's
pretty much no light life.
it's beautiful. It's beautiful.
Absolutely.
Plenty of
So
trees.
around Yeah, so around 2019, I became the CIT coordinator, the crisis intervention team coordinator for Douglas County. As time moved on, we were able to get 24-hour coverage for the mobile crisis team through ADAPT. Around this time, I think it was 2000, I was probably 23-ish or so. I actually did my internship for my bachelor's on the crisis team at ADAPT. So I worked, I did 10-hour days, one day a week. And I worked partly on the crisis team where I'm at now, and I worked partly with the mobile crisis team. Throughout that whole time, I was still helping out with the mobile crisis team um, in the regard of helping train their folks, provide
Mm.
some technical assistance, uh, help those folks who had not ever worked in any kind of crisis environment before. How do you be safe? How do you evaluate a call? How do you look at something, determine, do you think that this is something you're going to need a law enforcement officer with you or not? And my caveat to them was always, when in doubt, ask for an officer. We will always send
Hmm.
somebody to help you because we want you to be safe to be able to do your job most effectively for that person. Because let's be frank, most police officers don't want to deal with that. They would rather somebody else do it.
Hmm.
Uh, so Mercy Medical Center's behavioral health reopened in 2024. So we now have a functioning behavioral health unit. We have a 24-hour mobile crisis. Um, and then as I'm getting close to retiring, uh, I was approached by Adapt and offered a job. So I am actually the I am I'm a full-time employee, but I'm a half-time paid employee to be a youth suicide postvention response lead, the only paid position in the state of Oregon.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
Adapt has felt that responding to youth suicides is so critical and so important. And thankfully, we only average about 3 a year, that they actually decided to pay somebody. The other part of my other part of my job is to be a pre-commitment case manager.
Mhm.
So as the crisis team, we have a pre-commitment investigators, a therapist works at the hospital, and their job is to evaluate, investigate, uh, folks decide to see if they need to go move forward towards a civil commitment. So I help with the paperwork. I go out on the investigations with them, kind of act as uh, the second set of eyes, so to speak. And that way the investigator's not just by themselves.
But these are
So
very different work environments, policing and community mental health. Tell me about your experience in transitioning between these two. Did you have to adapt, or did they have to adapt to you, or how did that work?
so the nice thing is like I had already worked with the crisis team before, and I continually interacted with them. Ironically, my daughter worked on the crisis team
Hmm.
where I'm at right now,
Oh, so it's the
and
family business
kind of, yeah. She now is a therapist right down the hall, and
Oh,
I kind of
fantastic.
took her place on the team. Uh, it felt like a natural transition for me. Um, yeah, and I think part of it is over the last several years, um, even though I was a patrol sergeant, my responsibilities were for patrol, for supervising my team members. There was always the mental health um, stuff that I was doing, still doing the CIT coordination, helping out with the mobile crisis team, and it really was just it was a natural fit. It didn't seem like that there was any reason for me not to.
And so this is an extension of your curiosity, your extension of your personal interest. I see a lot of officers retire and go buy a boat and they're gone, and we never see them again. What, this is a little unusual that an officer would take on this pretty stressful task. Did you have any response from your colleagues in the force or others
No,
giving you advice
no, because actually they were not surprised. That sounds like the natural, perfect fit for you,
for Doug?
for Doug,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, and honestly, most of the folks who have retired from the Roseburg Police Department have, especially in the last 5 to 6, 7, 8 years, they all work somewhere else.
Mm.
Most of them actually work for the Cow Creek tribe, either doing security or policing.
Hmm.
And I still have a wife that's working, and there's no way in heck that I was going to be retiring and she was going to still be working. So I had to find something to do.
So it makes sense to continue working. And in this transition, it must have been a very different culture, though, between policing and community mental health. Did you?
Yes-ish. The good news is, so crisis work is crisis work, I think.
Mhm.
And, uh, this is a very different environment than sitting in an office waiting for somebody to come tell you about the problems that they're having so you as a therapist can help guide them through stuff. Crisis work is very much like policing. It's you're available, you're waiting for somebody who's in a crisis to be able to help them. And we have folks that come to our office that are in crisis, and so we'll step out in the hall and talk with them. Or if someone may just call on the phone, we'll help our mobile crisis folks because there's only two of them on duty and they're in one vehicle. And if there's several things going on, they might need assistance from us. So we'll help out with that as well.
Mhm. Mhm.
So it really seems more like the activity of the police work. You handle your calls, you have some preemptive things that you want to do, you have reports you have to write, and it keeps moving. It's ever changing. So that's one of the things that I think that was a really good fit for me. And you mentioned like this is a stressful job. Mm-mm. Try supervising police officers. That's a stressful job.
And so putting down the badge and the gun and all the resources that officers have, the law and the vehicle, et cetera, that has not been, that's been okay for you.
I I wonder. I think, prior to retiring, I was wondering if it was going to be a problem
Mhm,
because I mean I'd been in law enforcement for 33 years. Uh, I didn't have to worry about what I was going to get up in the morning and wear. I put on a t-shirt, put on underwear, put on socks, and I went to work and they provided me with something that I was going to wear every day.
mhm,
And I didn't have to worry about that. It was really nice. Um, but no, as I go through this, and I've been very thankful for the experiences that I had as a police officer. I wholeheartedly believe that was the right choice that I had in life. I wouldn't be where I am now if it wasn't for that. I think the skills that I learned while being a police officer uh, immensely helped where I am at now. And without those, I don't think I would be
mhm,
who I am or where I'm at today.
mhm, mhm. And it this sounds like it's you have your retirement, you have your pension. The salary they're giving you is nice, but it's not um, probably what you're used to. But this must give you additional benefits that are more personal, that you are
That's it,
satisfying
yes.
some itch within yourself.
100%. I don't like just sitting around. And if I can do the things that I want to do, which I still like to say was cliche to say that, well, I just want to help people. Well, that's true. I want to help people. And this is a way for me to continue helping my community. So somebody has to help folks in the community. So while I have the ability to do it, I feel like I kind of have the responsibility to do it. So I'm gonna keep doing it probably until my wife says no.
Well, thank you for your service to our nation, and thank you for our service to Douglas County and Roseburg. Very nice to meet you, Doug.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much for this opportunity.